Alrighty, y'all. Let's go ahead and review the main ideas that you should have touched on. What do we know about old imperialism? Well, first we start out with the new world in old imperialism were the colonies. So old imperialism is the colonization of the new world. What about new imperialism? That's the colonization of the old world. Exactly right. So when we talk about period 2, old imperialism, Columbian exchange, we're talking about the Americas being colonized by the Europeans. What enabled them to colonize so effectively? They had gunpowder technology, which gave them a military advantage. They also had a biological advantage in terms of immunity. Okay, the Native Americans lacked immunity to what? Smallpox and other old world diseases. So a combination of gunpowder technology and immunity to old world diseases enabled the Europeans to colonize the new world. Good so far? Now, what was their biggest motivation for colonization? Money, wealth. Remember the 3 G's? We have gold, glory, and God. But the most important one, the driving force, was the gold. And gold just stands in for wealth, right? So the first wealth that the Europeans were trying to get, was what? The spice trade, right? Portugal succeeded in doing that. How did Portugal get to the spice trade? They went around Africa with what explorer? Vasco da, with an A, Gama. Okay, so Portugal goes around the tip of Africa, gets to the spice trade. Spain is in competition with Portugal. Do they want a taste of those sweet, sweet spices? Yes, but can they go around Africa? No. Can they go through the Ottoman Empire? No. So what do they do instead? They go west. Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain sponsor Christopher Columbus to go west, and he lands in the Caribbean on accident, thinking it was Asia. But did they find any spices there? No. So no spices for wealth. That's in Asia. However, they did find alternative means of making money in the new world. What's bullion? Gold and silver. Okay, did the Europeans take a lot of gold and silver from the new world? Yes, they did. Okay, raw materials in general. Raw materials can include cash crops. Remember, cash crops are what you grow for money. Sugar, tobacco, cotton. Do you eat cotton or tobacco to live? No. What about potatoes and corn? Yes, potatoes and corn aren't cash crops. They're what crops? Staple crops. Exactly right. Yes, dear. Well, yeah, you don't need it to live. I mean, I might, but technically you don't need it to live. Okay, so cash crops, bullion. Now the Europeans were making all of that money from these raw materials, from gold and silver and tobacco and cotton, right? They're making all that profit, but were they doing all the work? No, they were doing very little of the work because of mercantilism, right? The purpose of the colonies is to make who rich? The mother country. So it's not Europeans that are growing cash crops or Europeans that are mining gold and silver. It's whom? The Native Americans and enslaved Africans, right? What do we call that coerced labor system of Native Americans? The encomienda. The Africans? The asiento. Okay, so economic exploitation of the New World was made possible through the coerced labor of the encomienda and the asiento. They're doing all the work. The Native Americans and the Africans are doing all the work, but who's getting all the profit? The Europeans. Thus starting the triangular trade. The triangular trade has 3 legs. We start in Europe and then go where with the first leg? Africa. What do the Europeans bring to Africa? Guns and alcohol, which are what kind of goods? Manufactured goods. What do they exchange those manufactured goods for? okay, for people who have been kidnapped and enslaved. Then we get to the second leg, from Africa to the Americas. And what do we call that leg? The Middle Passage, the transatlantic slave trade, the African diaspora, highly deadly, okay, highly inhumane. But the exchange of people, goods, ideas, crops from the old world and the new world as a whole is known as the Columbian Exchange. And the group that benefited the most from old imperialism were the Europeans under mercantilism. So that's all the gold part, the wealth, the economic incentives for why they did what they did to the New World. But that wasn't the only justification that they had. It wasn't just, oh, look at all this money we could make. They also had to justify the coerced labor systems that they implemented. And that's where we get to the other G, God. Are they going to use religion to justify what they do to the Native Americans? Yes, because what religion dominated Spain and Portugal? Catholicism. Were the Native Americans Catholic?
No.
Were the kidnapped Africans Catholic? No. So do they use converting the peoples of Africa and the Americas to Catholicism as a justification for their economic exploitation? Yes, they're saying, yeah, we took their language, we took their religion, we took their culture, we enslaved them and forced them to work in plantations. However, when they die from the genocide of their people, at least they'll go where? Heaven. So they're using religion as a justification for imperialism, right? We're saving the pagans of the New World from polytheism. We're saving the enslaved Africans from animism or the practices of Islam, right? Very weak justification, but do they make it anyway? Yes. Are they making it sound like they're benefiting the people they conquer? Yes. They're using this as a justification. And then finally, the last G, glory. We see nationalism building. Nationalism just means the creation of a nation, y'all. They're going to create nations, create countries. Was the US a country that came from old imperialism? Was Mexico, Brazil? Yeah, all of these nations emerge after the independence movements in period 3 that had been inspired by what ideals? Enlightenment ideals, exactly right. So we see new nations emerging. We see the Europeans in constant competition with each other for territory and wealth from the New World. This whole Columbian Exchange started with competition. Portugal got to Asia, and so what does Spain want to do? Find their own route to Asia for the spice trade, and then instead landed in the Americas. And at first, it's Spain and Portugal that lay claim to the New World, divvied up by the Pope in the Treaty of Tordesillas. But then in 1588, the Spanish and their Armada are defeated by England, which means new European countries, or they're European countries that already existed, are now going to be able to compete because Spain no longer controls the seas. Now England does. So do we see English and Dutch and French settlements increase in the Americas? Yes, all because they're in competition with one another in period 2. Now, did I miss anything? All righty. So now what we're going to do is we're going to apply all of that to new imperialism through the historical thinking skill of comparison. We are going to compare and contrast old imperialism with new imperialism. So we're going to start off simple. In old imperialism, we're talking about period 2, 1450s to 1750s, Columbian Exchange, Spain, Portugal, all that. New imperialism, we're talking about the 1750s to 1900s. So coming off of the Industrial Revolution, 2 different time periods. but they're going to have some similarities and differences. First similarity, who are the colonizers in both old and new imperialism? The Europeans. Okay, the Europeans were the colonizers. In old imperialism, where were they colonizing? The New World, the Americas. And in new imperialism, they were colonizing the old world, specifically Africa and Asia. Y'all may have heard of the term the scramble for Africa. That was all the European countries competing with one another to try and take as much land and resources from Africa as possible. Okay, because they, like in old imperialism, have a desire for raw materials. So while it is Europeans that are doing the colonizing, it's not the same Europeans each time. Under old imperialism, who dominated colonialization in the New World? Spain and Portugal dominated. Does anyone happen to know who dominated new imperialism? Yep, Britain. Why? Industrial Revolution. Excellent. Britain dominated because of the Industrial Revolution. They had a head start on the Industrial Revolution before everyone else. So it makes sense that they would have a head start on new imperialism, because to keep those textile factories going, to keep manufacturing those goods, they needed a lot of raw materials. Now, in old imperialism, the raw materials included bullion and cash crops, like what? Tobacco, cotton, and sugar. Same thing's going to happen in new imperialism. They also have a desire for raw materials, okay, but they're not going to desire tobacco and sugar as much. They need raw materials to help them in their clothing factories. So what raw material are they going to be growing for new imperialism? Cotton. And where, pray tell, are the British going to be growing that cotton? India. What else are they going to be growing in India? Opium. Wait, why didn't the British just grow cotton in their colonies in the Americas? Yeah, period 3. There are no British colonies of Virginia and Massachusetts and so on and so forth, because now those colonies have become the United States, their own country, right? And is the United States going to start colonizing? Yes, they are. So in period 3, the colonies become the colonizers. The British can't colonize the Americas anymore. They're independent. They're nations. So instead, they turn to Africa and Asia. In Asia, there's going to be an isolationist country that in period 2 tried to cut off all contact with the old world. But then in period 3, tried to rapidly industrialize and colonize others in Asia. Who was that? Japan. So again, the colonies become the colonizers by period 3. Is that a change over time? Absolutely. Now, another way that they're able to colonize in these territories is through technology. Period 2's technology is going to be pre-industrial. I'm trying so hard to write with this pen. Pre-industrial tech. And in period 3, they're utilizing industrial tech. What technology in period 2 gave the Europeans a military advantage over the natives? Gunpowder tech. What else? Yep, metal. That's pre-industrial revolution. Period 2, the Industrial Revolution is going to provide military advantages to the Europeans once again through the form of Maxim guns. Does anyone know what those are? Machine guns, exactly right. Steamboats and steel. So they both use technology to gain a military advantage over their colonies. There's just a difference in what type of technology. But remember, the main goal for imperialism was wealth. Okay, it was economic, oops, spelled economic wrong. Economic exploitation of the colonies. Making the colonies benefit the mother country. And that means that we are going to see competition between Europeans that increases colonialization and imperialism. Because in order for them to win, to be the best, most powerful European country, that means they need to take as much land and wealth as possible. And who are they taking it from? The colonies. Good. The colonies. So as a result, we are also going to see a similarity of racism being used in both of these types of imperialism. What are some examples of racism in old imperialism? And ended up enslaving them to benefit the Europeans. What was the enslavement of the Native Americans called? What about the enslavement of the Africans? Asiento. Did the Europeans view themselves as superior to them? Yes. Did they view themselves as bringing civilization to the Native Americans? Yeah, they completely erased Native American culture, polytheism, paganism, their language, okay, their traditions, and replaced it with whose traditions and language and culture? With theirs. Did they see a problem with that? No, because what did they use to justify this? Religion. Okay, they're bringing Christianity, therefore it can't all be a bad thing. Similar things going to happen in new imperialism, although they're not going to use religion as much. Instead, they're going to try to use science. Okay, so they're going to use social Darwinism. And justify imperialism through the white man's burden. So social Darwinism. How many of you have heard of Charles Darwin? Okay, so Charles Darwin came up with the theory of evolution, looking at species and certain traits within species. So there could be a species that has a particular trait, or a group within that species that has a particular trait that is beneficial in adapting them to their environment. So let's say that before the Industrial Revolution, period 2, skies are clear, no pollution, there's green everywhere, and there's a species of moth that the barn owls really like to eat. Now, the light tan moths blend in with the surrounding trees. So do they get eaten as much by the barn owls? No. What about the darker complected moths? Do they get spotted more easily by the barn owls? Yes, the owls can see the darker complected moths stand out against the trees and the green and the grass and so on and so forth. So according to Charles Darwin, okay, the trait of being tan color is going to be passed down over a very long time or a very short time? Long time. Does this evolution happen rapidly? No, it happens over an extremely long period of time. But are those traits inherently good, or do they depend on the environment? Depend on the environment. Pre-industrial revolution, no pollution. It's good to blend in with the trees and the leaves. But then post-industrial revolution, do we see a lot of soot in the air? Yeah. Does everything get kind of gray and dark? Yeah. So those lightly tan colored moths, are they going to stand out a lot more easily to the barn owls? Yeah. So is that trait of being a lighter tan color going to get passed down? Not nearly as much, because it's no longer adaptive. Now, Charles Darwin was applying this to species like finches, right? Birds and moths and lizards. Was he applying it to humans? Not directly. Was he applying it to society? No. Okay. But there is going to be a European man named Herbert Spencer who bastardizes the scientific theory of evolution and tries to apply it to society and tries to apply it to race. Herbert Spencer is the guy who came up with the phrase survival of the fittest. That the fittest survive and get to pass their genes down to their progeny, and the unfit don't survive. Therefore, the species gets better because those unfit traits are no longer a part of the gene pool. Now, as a European, who is he going to designate as the quote unquote fit? Other Europeans. He's going to use this to justify what Europeans do to non-Europeans. Okay, he's going to say that, oh, because of the Industrial Revolution, the Europeans got so rich and got so much technology, it must mean it's because we're superior, that we're better. Thus, we have the right to go and conquer other peoples, right? So he's going to try to apply this racist ideology to why Europeans should colonize or should take from other people. Does that make sense so far? All right. So social Darwinism, racism? Yes, yeah, unequivocally so. Because if you characterize yourself and your culture and your race as superior, then what are you saying about all of the others? That they're inferior, okay? So it's going to be used as a justification for what happens in Africa and in Asia during period 3. This leads into white man's burden, okay, which is going to lead us to our worksheet activity that we have for today. What is a burden? Up here. If you find something burdensome, do you want to do it? No. No. Is a responsibility a synonym for burden? Yeah, a little bit. Like if let's say that my car breaks down, my battery dies, and someone offers to give me a ride. I'm like, oh well, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be a responsibility. I don't want to put you out, make you go out of your way, right? So already, and y'all don't write on these class papers, this is my class. Already, from just the word white man's burden, you already see that it's trying to imply that white men have a responsibility. Yes. Okay. Now, this term of white man's burden came from a poem by Rudyard Kipling. Have y'all heard of this poem before? Have you covered it in any of your other classes? Does everyone have a copy? All right, so this poem, y'all, is by a British man. Is Britain European? Yes. This poem is about imperialism. Would Britain or British people be pro or anti-imperialism? Pro-imperialism. So might they try to justify their imperialism? Yes, they're going to try to justify what they're doing. Okay, so let's start off with this first page. Many people in the industrialized nations of the world thought they had a duty, a responsibility to spread Western ideas and knowledge around the world. People were considered inferior if their religion or culture differed from that of Europe and America. Well, wait a minute. I thought the Americas were colonies. Why would they be advanced? They were colonized by the Europeans, and in period 3, are they still colonies? No, because nationalism, Enlightenment ideals, they have engaged in their independence revolutions and become their own countries. So people were considered inferior if their religion or culture differed from that of Europeans or Americans. Does that sound similar to what we saw in old imperialism? Did the Europeans view other people as inferior if they weren't Catholic or if they didn't speak a European language? Yeah, so we see yet again a continuity in time. British poet Rudyard Kipling is widely considered to be the most powerful and influential voice in favor of imperialism. So here is a British man who is pro-imperialism. So how is he going to portray the imperialist British? In a good light, in a positive light. Is he going to make it sound like they're actually helping with what they're doing? Yeah. So is that bias? Yeah. The title, the title of one of his best known poems is The White Man's Burden. This phrase is often used to sum up the Western attitude towards non-Western attitude. What do you think that attitude is? How are the Western peoples going to view the non-Western peoples? Inferior. Are they going to be equal? No, the Europeans are going to put themselves up as superior and everyone else as inferior. Does that then allow them to justify to themselves the exploitation, the economic exploitation of Africa and Asia? Yes. Many Europeans agreed with what Kipling wrote. They thought that people outside of Europe and America were primitive barbarians, and they needed the help and guidance of more quote unquote civilized nations. These wrong ideas caused Europeans to justify changing the ways of life for millions of people. So let's look at that first stanza. Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile to serve your captives' need. So this is saying, Europeans, take up the white man's burden, send forth the best of the white man. Send your sons to exile. Where do you think exile is? The armies? Yeah. To work where? Where's exile? Where's outside of civilization? No, factories, urban. Yeah, this is a European, right? What would he consider as non-civilized? So he's saying, go bind your sons to exile in places like Africa or Asia, okay? To serve your captives' need. So serving the people of Africa and Asia. So it's saying, send your best Europeans to these uncivilized areas to serve these uncivilized peoples, right? That is his perspective or point of view. So is he making it sound like the Europeans are helping? Yeah. To wait in heavy harness on fluttered folk and wild, your new caught sullen peoples, half devil and half child. First of all, let's see if this is saying something nice or saying something rude. If someone called you a half devil, would that be a compliment or an insult? Insult. What if they called you half child? Insult, right? Still pretty insulting. Like devil, what does that mean? Bad, evil. To be a child, are you independent? Are you autonomous? Can you be alone or do you need supervision? Supervision. Okay, so new caught sullen peoples, half devil, half child. To whom is Kipling referring to with those two lines? Non-Europeans. He was referring to people in Africa and people in Asia as half devil, half child, meaning that they need supervision, they need a parent, and Kipling is claiming that who should step up and be that supervision? The Europeans. Now, did anyone ask them to do that? No. But remember, this is used as justification for the economic exploitation of those continents. They claim that they're going in to help and to civilize, but does that make it true? No, it is a justification for what they did. Okay. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit, to work another's gain. So these Europeans are working, but they're claiming that they're working to benefit whom? Non-Europeans. Is that actually what happened? No, but it is simply the claim that they're making. Are we good so far? All right. So now look at those three questions. What was the white man's burden? What parts of this poem prove that it's really about imperialism? And do you think the idea of white man's burden is really to help people in impoverished areas of the world or not? Talk with your partner briefly for the next couple of minutes about how you would answer those three questions and why. What was the white man's burden? Justification of colonizing non-European countries. The white man's burden that they took on to humanitarily help who they considered were uncivilized. First of all, did anyone ask them to do that? No, but they're claiming that it is their duty, their responsibility as good citizens to spread their advancements, to go into these countries to modernize and civilize them. Now, were these continents and countries and areas already civilized? Yes. Had they been civilized long before Europe was? Yeah. Might I remind you of the Dark Ages, where Europe was having a real rough time and everyone else in the world was having a golden age. Exactly right. Okay. So the Europeans claim that they are superior, that they are the most modern and the most civilized, and therefore they have a responsibility to forcibly invade these other areas and spread their civilization. Is all of that a front or a justification for economic exploitation? Absolutely. Okay, they're using it as an excuse for what happens in new imperialism. What parts of this poem prove that the white man's burden is really about conquering these areas? The last part of what? 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. They're claiming to benefit whom? The non-European people. Exactly right. But who are they actually benefiting economically? Themselves. They're competing with other European countries for glory, for a place in the sun. They're competing with other European countries for raw materials to take back to manufacture in their textile factories and their various other factories. Okay, so it's really more about gaining territory and raw materials than it is about helping others. What about your captives need and your new caught people? Does that imply that they're going in and taking people and exploiting their resources? Yes. Part 3. Do you think the idea of the white man's burden is really about helping people in impoverished areas of the world? No. What is it really about? Colonization, justifying their colonization. All right, now turn to the picture on the back. before looking at the words, just look at the picture. Tell me what you see. Colonel Sanders, of course. It's not actually Colonel Sanders, but everyone says it is. Okay, so what man, what continent do you think he's from? Yeah, a European man washing his hands in the sink. Yes, dear.
On a boat, yeah.
On a boat. Yeah, you can tell it's a boat because look at this little like boat window there. So is he traveling? Yeah, he's washing his hands and he's traveling. He's on a boat. What else do you see? The background. Yep. What is there? Yeah, helping, right? They viewed him as helping by what are they distributing here? Yeah, they're distributing the soap that's in the ad. Y'all may remember from the second SAQ and the DBQ where it showed Shah Jahan, right, with the halo around his head, and he was elevated above everyone else. And where was everyone else in position in that photo? Lower. Do you see the same physical representation here? Okay, who have they put as higher than the other? The European. Yes, dear.
Can this also be like a scam? Because like they're saying you're like with like those clicking out ads, you're gonna win this, and then they're really just like not really lying to you.
I mean, like this is in and of itself a lie. The lie of Europeans being somehow superiorly civilized over other groups that already have civilization, but they're specifically using racism to try to sell their product as well. Okay, so we see boats with goods, lots of soap. We see a non-European being given soap by a European who is standing up while the other non-European person is kneeling. And yeah, of course, Colonel Sanders on a boat traveling, washing his hands. Then we get to the written part. The first step towards lightening the white man's burden. Okay, so making the white man's burden, what, easier or harder? Easier is through teaching the virtues of cleanliness. So to make the white man's burden easier, you need to teach people to clean themselves. Is that pretty demeaning? Yeah, it's saying that Europeans are spreading hygienic practices. Again, Middle Ages, Dark Ages. Yeah, cholera, the Industrial Revolution. When you think of Britain in the 1700s and 1800s, do you think of paragon of cleanliness? No. So a bit hypocritical, very demeaning. Okay, but they're presenting themselves as civilized with their virtues of cleanliness, and that they need to somehow spread this revolutionary idea outside Europe, as if they haven't already figured all this out centuries ago. Pear soap is a potent factor in brightening the dark corners of the earth. Yeah, pretty racist. To whom are they referring? Everywhere that's not European or American. Yep. As civilization advances, according to them, what is civilization? European. Well, amongst the cultured of all nations, it holds the highest place. It is the ideal toilet soap, meaning just bathroom soap for washing your hands. It's not for toilets, right? So if you're a civilized nation, whose soap are you going to use? Pear soap. So they're trying to sell their product, but they're also using social Darwinism and the zeitgeist of the white man's burden during new imperialism to mark up their profits. Okay, packaging it in this idea of this soap is the best soap, it's the most civilized of the soaps. So number one, what does this ad imply about non-Western people? That they're dirty, that they need civilization, that they don't practice hygiene, right? Demeaning. How is this ad representative of the white man's burden? Yeah, it's showing, lightening the burden of civilization by transmitting virtues of cleanliness, brightening the dark corners of the earth, as civilization advances. Once again, showing that justification of a superiority complex, justifying, oh, this is why we can go in and take this, that, and the other. Oh, this part? Exactly right. Literally, this aspect of the picture represents this idea, okay, of European civilization being spread to non-Europeans. Is this image condescending or caring? Extremely condescending, right? Okay, all of this is going on in period 3 with new imperialism. So do we see racism in old imperialism? Do we see it in new imperialism? So would that be a similarity or a difference? Similarity. Are there any questions? Yes, dear. You keep that. Yes. You keep everything except for the documents we just dealt with, because that's a class copy.